So, Joe, I know that a lot of people won't know about your story and what happened, so I think I just want to turn this over to you and ask you to tell us your story from the beginning. What happened to you?
Certainly. The story goes back in time about 2 years, but I'm not going to tell you a 2-year-long story.
OK.
Everyone
We've got a limited amount of time.
Everyone falls asleep. But suffice to say that I was one of the unlawfully cancelled professors from Essex University.
Right.
I was due to give a lecture on trans rights in prisons. The students kicked off, the staff kicked off, the lecture was cancelled. I was blacklisted from Essex University.
Right. December
2019. That started a whole series of problems within my own university, the Open University. I was made pretty much to feel like a pariah. I was kind of put on the outside. At one point, a colleague told me that my views were like having a racist uncle sitting at the Christmas dinner table.
Can you clarify, people who are watching, because they won't be clear, what are those views and why did people find them so rebarbative? What was it about them?
Well, I mean, it's very... I still struggle, OK? I'm going to admit that to you. So I believe that sex is immutable, that if somebody is transgendered, they can't actually change their sex, although they may change their gender identity. Sure. I do believe in trans rights, but I also know that in particular contexts there is a contest between trans rights and sex-based rights, and we see that particularly in prisons.
Yes.
Right? I believe that we need single-sex exemptions in particular places, and those single-sex exemptions, meaning women only or female only, exist largely for reasons to protect women from male violence.
And, of course, your area is criminology, so this is particularly important to you, is the idea of, you know, obviously a lot of the women in prisons will have been victims of sexual assault. We've seen examples of male-bodied individuals who identify as women and are transferred into female prison, the female prison system. And a lot of people, I think, when they hear that, they don't think that's actually happening.
No, and this is one of the really confusing bits. Most people think that somebody who is transgendered in a trans woman in a female prison will, and forgive me for being vulgar here for a second, may have had some sort of surgical intervention.
OK.
Not necessarily.
So it could just be a matter of identity?
Yeah, it could just be a matter of identity. And it could be a matter of identity plus a GRC, a gender recognition certificate.
Right.
From my point of view, when the government announced the self-identification policy, i.e., you can just identify as a woman and become a woman without any intermediary process, like, you know, doctors signing it off, that, to me, threw red flags in the air.
But you're not at all saying that trans people shouldn't have the same rights as everyone else?
No, I would never do that. I mean, I've been out as a lesbian for God knows how long. I've fought for, you know, the rights of sexual minorities for all of my life.
Yes.
So no, I'm not.
I just say that because I know that that's the allegation that is often thrown towards anyone who has the kind of views that you've mentioned.
Yeah.
But also, of course, interestingly, the views that you've just outlined will be the views that are shared by the vast majority of decent people in the country.
Yeah, generally, until recently, we didn't think they were controversial.
So, with that in mind, now that we've got a sense of what the views were and why people turned against you, can you just talk to us a little bit about your experiences with the Open University, with the other academics? What happened there?
OK, so various things bubbling away in the background for 2 years. It all came to a head this summer when I launched with colleagues the Open University Gender Critical Research Network. A Gender Critical Research Network is a group of academics who want to get together, who think that sex is important and want to research how, where, why sex matters in different social contexts. It's not particularly challenging, I didn't think, but it produced the most violent reaction in the university. It was almost like the university had a heart attack. Several of my close colleagues organised a public harassment campaign. This public harassment campaign ended up with a letter asking the university to distance itself from the research network, asking people to sign the letter. There were over 360 academic staff who signed that letter, basically asking for us to be shut down and accusing us of transphobia simply for using the name gender critical. Right?
I see.
Now, I'm going to come back to that in a minute. They also time-stamped a podcast that I had taken part in. And as evidence of my supposed, and all the other network members' supposed transphobia, was one bit where I had the temerity to criticise Stonewall.
Right.
Right, now we know what happens when people criticise Stonewall.
We do, yes, exactly.
And there were two other bits that I didn't even say. It was the podcaster who said.
OK.
So not only was it a very highly defamatory letter, it was also calling for direct discrimination. That was also coupled with 2 other open statements that were placed on university servers, accusing the network of contributing to a climate of hostility and asking for the university to, in effect, shut us down. Now, I want to come back to that because part of my job is to do research. So if you ask my employer to shut down my research network, you're asking me to shut down my research.
Of course.
So it's a direct call for discrimination.
Yes.
Now, I submitted a claim, a grievance to the university and said, I'm being bullied and harassed. This has gone back for 2 years. It's erupted into this. Please do something about it because it's affecting my mental health, my well-being, my work, etc. I got signed off with acute PTSD.
And you flagged all this to your employers?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Almost on a daily basis. And this was in the beginning of June that this happened. Almost on a daily basis. And the university dragged its heels. Now, on November the 12th, I received an email from HR telling me I had asked them when the outcome of this grievance would be. Because in the meantime, I haven't been able to do much of my work.
No, of course.
You know, there are 360 people who think I'm a transphobe in my university. The well has truly been poisoned for my name. So I asked, when will I get an outcome? And they said, well, you may get an outcome before Christmas, or you may not.
And that process is part of the psychological torture, isn't it, in a way? Because it just goes on and on and on. Almost as though the process is the punishment in this situation.
Quite. And here's the problem. Where people have been accused of transphobia, it doesn't matter whether or not it's true.
No.
That accusation is enough to end careers at this point. We know what happened to Kathleen Stock. Right? We know what happened to her. And, of course, my story is much less dramatic than Kathleen's. But yesterday I announced that instead of just going through that grievance, I actually announced yesterday that I'm taking the Open University to court for constructive dismissal. Which, in my mind, it's the first time any of us, and when I say us, I mean people who have been accused and vilified in such a manner, have actually tried to hold their universities to account legally.
So this could set a very important precedent.
I'm very much hoping so, yes. I'm very much hoping
so. What is the next step then? What will it be? It will be literally taking it to the court and see what...
Quite literally, Well, I lodged a complaint that they failed to protect me from bullying and harassment about a month ago. We will amend that complaint to include constructive dismissal. I resigned my post last week. Happily, I have a new post that I can go to on the 1st of January to a university that takes seriously its commitments to academic freedom. But at the moment, the Open University have 28 days left to respond to my claim. And then it's the standard court process.
And why do you think it is that so few academics are willing to take a stand when it's quite clearly harassment and bullying? I mean, there's no getting around that. And I would have thought that all academics are for the principle of academic freedom, and particularly because the views that as we've said, the views that you're mentioning aren't exactly the most egregious, outrageous views in the world. They're fairly mainstream ideas.
I'm 25 years in the game now, 24 years in the game, and there has been a change. I think we have some academics who see themselves more as activists. You've mentioned this before on your programme. And I can understand why they think that. There are things happening in universities that kind of engender that type of response from some of our younger academics. You have a whole flank of people who are terrified, afraid, or just don't want the trouble to come to them. You know? So I know several of my very close working colleagues I've said to them, why haven't you stood up for me? And they've said things like, well, we don't want to get in trouble like you've got.
And these are people you know well?
That I've worked with.
Oh, right.
That I've worked directly with.
And then how do you respond to that when someone says to you, well, I can't, we might be friends, but I can't take a public stand because it's too risky? Do you understand where they're coming from?
I do. And, the big grown-up in me says, why would you want to put yourself in this situation? My name's been dragged through the mud for 2 years. Do you know what I mean? And since June, it's been the most public of conflict, and it keeps me awake at night. So why would I want them to experience that? But then on the other hand, I sit there and think, but if you don't stand up with me, then you leave me to have my head shot off.
So is this the point that it's going to have to be a numbers game, that there's going to have to be a sufficient number of people who are willing to stand up and say, no, this isn't right?
No, I think it's the law we need.
Right.
If you don't mind me disagreeing with you.
Of course not.
Yeah, no, I think it's the law that we need, because at this point, management, now, I'm not talking about the Open University management, but just in general, management haven't come down one side or the other, right?
But I thought your views were protected by law. In the Maya for Starter case, that established that gender-critical views are protected by law, in fact. So don't the universities have a responsibility already?
Yeah, but law is only as good as the mechanisms that are used to implement it. Right? So at this point, my university, failed to implement any of those protections.
Yes.
Right? So then the only recourse now is to take them to court so that the court will force them to implement it.
And if that happens, if the weight of the court is behind what you're saying, then surely that will encourage more people to be open about what they think.
I hope so. I mean, I'm not doing this. The very last thing I ever wanted to do, and this is, the honest truth, I do not want to be a poster child for this campaign.
Yeah, I understand.
Right? I've become one, accidentally and reluctantly, but having become one now, what we really need is that legal framework so that universities know they cannot leave people like me out at sea, just being shot at by vile accusations.
Well, it's an incredible story. I wish you all the best, and I hope that it works out the way it should.
Yeah.